With her last $450 clutched in trembling fingers and an eviction notice taped to her apartment door, Rachel Turner watched in stunned silence as the contractor's crowbar pried loose the warped floorboards of the abandoned bakery she had impulsively purchased at a tax auction. Beneath the rotting wood lay a rusted metal box containing yellowed parchment maps, handwritten tactical notes, and a leather-bound journal bearing the insignia of General Thomas Wellington, documents that would soon bring museum curators and Civil War historians to her crumbling storefront with proposals that would transform her desperate last stand into an unexpected second chance at life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The relentless summer heat poured through the broken windows of the dilapidated bakery as Rachel Turner surveyed the damage assessment spread across what had once been a quaint display counter. At 47, the deepening worry lines etched around her eyes and the premature silver threading through her once-auburn hair told the story of a woman who had weathered an impossible year. Despite the exhaustion that seemed to hang from her shoulders, like a physical weight, her eyes still flickered with a quiet determination that had become her only constant companion. "The entire electrical system needs to be completely replaced," she said, tracing her finger along the red-marked areas of the inspector's report. "And the plumbing hasn't been updated since the 1960s. Jackson Rivera, the contractor she had, somehow convinced to look at the property despite her obvious financial constraints, leaned against the peeling wall and studied the building plans. At 53, his weathered face carried the deep lines earned from decades of renovating historic buildings throughout Millfield County. "Supporting beam in the back kitchen is compromised," he said, his voice rough from years of working around construction dust. "Renovation costs on a place this old, especially with the structural damage from years of neglect, will be astronomical." "Are you absolutely certain about this, Rachel?" The local radio station played quietly from Jackson's portable radio, the announcer's voice tight with excitement. "Coming up next, Millfield's 175th Founders Day celebration preparations are underway. Mayor Thompson promises this year's Civil War reenactment will be the largest in county history." The once charming interior of Hartwick's Bakery, with its now cracked penny tile floor and damaged crown molding, had witnessed over 70 years of community history. A vintage cash register, missing several keys and covered in dust, had once cheerfully rung up fresh bread and wedding cakes during the bakery's glory days. Today it stood as a silent witness to Rachel's desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to rebuild her life after losing everything. Meredith Oakes, Rachel's closest friend since college, entered from the back kitchen, dust-coating her practical denim overalls. At 48, her sensible bob haircut and efficient movement spoke of someone who had learned to navigate life's challenges with pragmatic determination. "Roof's got at least 3 major leaks," she reported, accepting the bottle of water Rachel handed her. "And there's significant termite damage in the storage room. Those antique baking molds you were excited about might already be too damaged to salvage." Rachel's expression darkened. The vintage baking equipment, with its ornate copper molds and cast iron forms, had been one of the features that convinced her to bid on the property, despite her precarious finances. Now it was just one more piece of her fragile plan threatened by the building's extensive deterioration. Rachel moved to the front window, staring out at the quiet main street of Millfield, a small town that had once thrived, but now struggled to maintain its historic downtown. Against the pull of highway development and chain stores, Hartwick's Bakery had been deteriorating long before she discovered it. 4 years vacant after the death of its third-generation owner, the once beloved establishment had fallen into severe disrepair. The auction price had been remarkably low, reflecting both the property's condition and the limited number of buyers willing to take on such a massive renovation project. The final eviction notice from her apartment complex had arrived 3 weeks ago, 30 days to vacate. After her husband Daniel's unexpected death 18 months earlier, the discovery of his hidden gambling debts and failed investments had decimated their once comfortable life. The modest insurance payout that should have provided temporary security had instead gone to creditors, leaving Rachel with nothing but mounting bills and a shattered sense of stability. "The Reynolds hardware store sold last week," Meredith said quietly, sweeping dust from a corner shelf. "That corporate convenience chain bought it. They're gutting the interior next month." Jackson's jaw tightened. "Vultures have been picking at every historic building in town, tearing down a century of history for lottery tickets and slushy machines." The situation was painfully familiar in Millfield. Historic storefronts were disappearing one by one, replaced by generic corporate establishments that erased the town's unique architectural character. Hartwick's Bakery was one of the last untouched pre-Civil War era buildings remaining, a distinction that brought more historical significance than financial value. "Quick Stop Corporation called again this morning," Meredith added reluctantly. "Offered to take the property off your hands before the repair costs make it worthless, as they put it. 40 cents on the dollar, I'm guessing," Rachel said bitterly. "Just enough to cover what I paid at auction, but not a penny for the historical significance or potential." The unspoken reality hung in the air. Hartwick's Bakery wasn't just a desperate investment. It had become Rachel's entire future plan. Every remaining dollar from her husband's life, insurance after the creditors took their share, had gone into purchasing this crumbling storefront. If she lost the bakery, she lost everything: her investment, her housing plans, and her last chance at financial recovery. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rachel reached for her work gloves hanging by the door. "I'll check the kitchen floor myself. Maybe we can salvage some of the original tiles for the restoration." "Not alone," Jackson insisted, grabbing his toolbox. "Those old floors can be treacherous. 2 sets of eyes spot dangers twice as fast." "This building has already cost you enough," Rachel protested softly. Jackson placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. "You hired me for an assessment, Rachel. Consider this part of my professional obligation. Besides, I've been restoring historic buildings for 30 years. I didn't build this reputation by standing back when things got challenging." As they prepared to examine the kitchen more thoroughly, the radio announcer's voice rose with local pride. "Breaking news! The Millfield Historical Society announces a special exhibition on General Wellington's Lost Riverside campaign, featuring newly discovered letters." Historians still debate the significance of Wellington's missing battle plans from the summer of 1863. Rachel and Jackson exchanged curious glances. The Civil War history of Millfield was a point of local pride, with General Wellington's headquarters having been established in the town during a pivotal campaign. "That's been the town's claim to fame for generations," Rachel said. "Every school child in Millfield learns about Wellington's mysterious battle plans. Major tourist draw for the region," Jackson agreed. "I restored the windows in the Wellington Museum 5 years back. Folks come from all over to see where the general stayed." Meredith handed them each a flashlight, her eyes reflecting concern she wouldn't voice. "That delivery truck knocked out another storefront window down the block last week. Be careful where you step. There's probably broken glass from when this place was vandalized." As they stepped into the bakery's kitchen, the summer heat intensified in the enclosed space. Sunlight streamed through dust-covered windows, illuminating decades of neglect. Neither Rachel nor Jackson could have imagined how the next few hours would forever change the future of Hartwick's Bakery, and how a desperate effort to examine damaged flooring would uncover secrets that would reach all the way to the Smithsonian Institution. The ancient hinges protested as Rachel pushed open the swinging door to the kitchen, Jackson following close behind, his flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. The air grew warmer and mustier with each step, carrying the unmistakable scent of decades-old wood meeting unwelcome moisture. Previous owner must have attempted some renovation back here, Jackson observed as they entered the kitchen. These cabinets aren't original to the building, added maybe 30, 40 years ago. Rachel's flashlight revealed a kitchen far larger than she had expected, stretching toward the back of the building. Portions featured newer construction, while other sections revealed the original brick walls and timber supports. Several floorboards were visibly damaged, warping upward as if pushed from below. Main water damage seems to be concentrated there, Jackson said, pointing toward the far corner where several floorboards had completely rotted away. Foundation shifting. Not surprising in a building this old, especially with poor maintenance. The portable dehumidifier Rachel had hastily purchased and installed the previous day was struggling against the ambient moisture, its collection tank already half full. She checked the unit, confirming it was still operational. "We need to see how extensive the damage is," she acknowledged, frustrated by the seemingly endless problems, "and find the original foundation points. These old buildings usually had stone footers that might still be sound." They moved carefully across the uneven floor, inspecting the perimeter of the spacious kitchen. Jackson examined the construction with professional interest, occasionally stopping to point out features of the original craftsmanship or later modifications. "Brickwork on these walls is exceptional," he noted, running his hand along a perfectly preserved section. "They don't build like this anymore. These bricks have stood for over 150 years. Rachel appreciated his evident respect for the property. In Jackson, she had found not just a contractor, but someone who understood the historical value of what she was trying to save. In the week since purchasing Hartwick's bakery, most people had regarded her decision as either foolishly romantic or financially suicidal, perhaps both. As they reached the eastern corner of the kitchen, Rachel's flashlight beam caught something unusual, a section of flooring that appeared slightly different from the surrounding wood. "What's that?" she asked, moving closer. Jackson followed, his experienced eye immediately noticing what had caught her attention. "Different wood pattern," he said thoughtfully. "And look," he directed his flashlight toward a small gap between the boards where earlier water damage had caused the wood to separate. "The grain direction changes here." Rachel knelt down to examine the floor more carefully. A square section approximately 4 feet across was visible, the floorboards running perpendicular to the surrounding flooring. Unlike the water-damaged sections elsewhere, these boards seemed to have been deliberately arranged. "There's something underneath," she said, excitement momentarily overriding her concern about the building's condition. "A trap door, maybe, or some kind of storage space?" Jackson joined her, placing his hand against the unusual section of flooring. He pressed experimentally at different points, his decades of restoration work having taught him that old buildings often held secrets in their construction. To their mutual surprise, a section of flooring shifted slightly under pressure. "False floor," Jackson breathed, professional excitement evident in his voice. "Might be an old storage cellar, or maybe a Prohibition-era addition. Let me just—" He applied pressure more deliberately, and with a grinding sound of wood against wood, the section began to give way. Jackson quickly retrieved a crowbar from his toolbox and carefully pried up the edge of what was now clearly a concealed trapdoor. As the section of flooring lifted away, their flashlight beams penetrated the darkness to reveal a small cavity beneath the kitchen floor. "Hidden storage space," Rachel whispered, her light illuminating the cavity to reveal what appeared to be a metal box, approximately 2 feet long and 1 foot wide, its once gleaming surface now dulled with age but still intact. "That's not just a storage cellar," Jackson stated unnecessarily, his flashlight joining Rachel's to illuminate the unexpected discovery. "That's a deliberate hiding place. Rachel carefully reached into the space, brushing away decades of dust and debris as she lifted the metal box. It was surprisingly heavy, constructed of thick iron with a simple latch mechanism rather than a lock. Civil War-era craftsmanship, Jackson observed, examining the box without touching it. Hand-forged, probably local blacksmith work. Question is, what was valuable enough to hide beneath the floor in a bakery? Rachel asked, her fingers trembling slightly as she examined the latch. There was no keyhole, just a simple mechanism that had apparently remained closed for decades. With a deep breath, Rachel carefully lifted the latch and opened the lid. Inside, protected from moisture and time by the metal container, lay a collection of documents. Yellowed papers covered in handwritten notes, several folded maps with tactical markings, and a leather-bound journal rested within, remarkably well preserved despite their age. Rachel carefully lifted the journal, finding a small metal insignia embedded in its cover. Her flashlight revealed engraved text, the letters formal and precise, property of Brig Gen T. Wellington, 5th Division, Army of the Cumberland, 1863. Wellington, she read aloud, glancing at Jackson questioningly. His expression changed, eyes widening with the realization of what those documents might signify in a building of this era. Could be, he whispered. But that would mean, before he could complete his thought, a loud crash from the front of the bakery interrupted the moment, the sound of the bell over the door jangling violently. "Hello," came a voice from the front room. "Building inspector, anyone here? We've had reports of unauthorized construction work." Rachel and Jackson exchanged alarmed glances. "We need to secure this," Rachel said decisively, her mind racing with implications of their discovery. "Cover it up until we can properly examine it." Jackson nodded, already helping her replace the box in its hiding spot. "Those documents could be historically significant, Rachel. If they're authentic Wellington papers." They worked quickly, temporarily covering the hidden compartment with the loose floorboards, before heading to the front of the bakery to address the unexpected visitor. The discovery had added an unexpected dimension to Rachel's already complicated situation, transforming her impulsive purchase from merely a desperate financial gamble into something potentially far more significant. As they emerged from the kitchen, dusty and startled but trying to appear casual, they found not only the building inspector, but Meredith engaged in conversation with him, her expression shifting rapidly from concern to protective defensiveness. "They're here now," she said to the inspector, eyes meeting Rachel's with a warning look. "As I mentioned, Ms. Turner is the new owner and is simply assessing renovation needs with her contractor. No actual construction has begun." The building inspector, a thin man with a clipboard and an officious manner, turned to Rachel with evident skepticism. "Ms. Turner, I'm Howard Fleming, County Building Inspector. We've received complaints about potential code violations and unauthorized structural work at this address." Rachel and Jackson exchanged puzzled glances. The timing seemed too precise to be coincidental. Someone had reported them within minutes of their discovery. Through the dusty front windows, Rachel noticed a black SUV parked across the street, its occupant watching the bakery with evident interest. "How could anyone possibly know what we just found?" Rachel whispered to Jackson. "We only discovered it ourselves 5 minutes ago." Jackson's expression was grim. Historic properties like this attract attention, especially ones with connections to Civil War figures. Hartwick's Bakery has been on preservationists' radar for decades. Before they could further discuss this alarming development, the bell above the door jangled again as 2 more visitors entered. A middle-aged woman in a tailored suit carrying a leather portfolio, and an older gentleman with wire-rimmed glasses. "And the careful manner of an academic, Ms. Turner?" the woman asked, her demeanor professional but urgent. "I'm Dr. Catherine Marshall from the State Historical Preservation Office. This is Professor James Hargrove from Millfield University's History Department." We need to speak with you immediately about what you've discovered beneath your kitchen floor. The summer heat continued to press against the building's windows, but for Rachel, the true pressure was just beginning, one that would connect her failing bakery to Civil War secrets, national museums, and a historical mystery that had remained hidden for over 150 years. In the dusty front room of Hartwick's Bakery, surrounded by peeling paint and broken display cases, Rachel found herself facing officials who somehow knew about a discovery she had made mere minutes ago. "May we come in?" Dr. Marshall asked, though her tone suggested it wasn't really a question. "What we need to discuss is urgent and of significant historical interest." Rachel hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Of course, though I should warn you the building is in considerable disrepair. We're just beginning to assess the renovation needs." The visitors entered, their practiced eyes sweeping the deteriorating interior before focusing back on Rachel. "This is Jackson Rivera, my contractor," Rachel explained, gesturing to Jackson, who stood watching the exchange with careful neutrality, "and my friend Meredith Oakes." Professor Hargrove, a slender man in his 60s with the stooped posture of someone who had spent decades bent over historical texts, spoke up. "Miss Turner, we have reason to believe you've uncovered historically significant documents in this property, potentially containing General Wellington's missing battle plans that have been sought by historians for generations." Rachel exchanged glances with Jackson, whose subtle nod confirmed her suspicion about the initials they had found. "T. Wellington," she said quietly. "General Thomas Wellington." Dr. Marshall's eyebrows rose slightly, perhaps surprised by Rachel's knowledge. "Yes, General Wellington's tactical documents from the Riverside Campaign disappeared after the Battle of Millfield Creek in 1863. Historical records indicate he maintained secret correspondence with Union command while headquartered in this town, particularly regarding the flanking maneuver that ultimately proved decisive in the campaign. Hartwick's Bakery was built by Wellington's quartermaster," Jackson added, his knowledge of historical architecture extending to the properties he restored. "Samuel Hartwick was responsible for supplying Wellington's troops during their encampment here. The building stayed in the Hartwick family until 1952. Professor Hargrove nodded appreciatively. "You know your local history, Mr. Rivera. What few people realize is that General Wellington entrusted certain sensitive documents to Hartwick for safekeeping, papers too strategically valuable to risk capture, but too historically significant to destroy." Rachel processed this information, connecting it to their discovery. "The metal box we found? It contained maps and a journal." "Precisely," Professor Hargrove confirmed with barely contained excitement. "Wellington and Hartwick created a secure hiding place here, away from potential Confederate spies. They likely intended to retrieve the documents after the campaign, but Wellington was wounded at Millfield Creek and evacuated northward. The documents remained hidden, their location lost when both men died before war's end." Dr. Marshall stepped forward, her expression serious. "Miss Turner, those documents, if authentic, represent an extraordinary historical discovery. Their academic and historical value is immeasurable. Some may contain information that would completely revise our understanding of that pivotal campaign." Rachel felt a defensive instinct rise. This discovery, this building, they represented her last chance at financial recovery. "I understand the historical significance, but Hartwick's Bakery is my property. I purchased it legally, contents included." "Of course," Dr. Marshall acknowledged smoothly. "We're not here to make claims without due process. However, given the potential historical importance," she gestured to the building's obvious state of disrepair, "we'd like to propose a cooperative approach to examining and preserving these documents properly." The tension in the room was palpable, broken only by Meredith's practical intervention. "Perhaps we should all move to the front corner. There are still some functional chairs there, and it's the only area without active leaks." This sensible suggestion was accepted, and the group relocated to a slightly less damaged section of the bakery. Despite water stains on the ceiling, the area retained traces of its former charm, with vintage advertisements still visible on the walls. Once settled, Professor Hargrove continued with evident academic enthusiasm. The Wellington battle plans have been something of a holy grail for Civil War historians for generations. References in military correspondence confirm their existence, but their contents remain one of the great historical mysteries of the war's Western theater. Rachel considered her position carefully before responding. "We found the metal box less than an hour ago. We haven't had time to properly examine the contents." "Probably wise," Dr. Marshall noted. "Old documents can be extremely fragile. We have conservation specialists who can examine them without causing damage." Jackson cleared his throat. "With all due respect, what exactly are you proposing?" "Rachel owns this property and has invested everything she has in saving it from developers who would demolish it without a second thought for its historical significance." This direct question seemed to prompt a shift in Dr. Marshall's approach. She exchanged glances with Professor Hargrove before addressing Rachel directly. "Miss Turner, the State Historical Preservation Office would like to propose an arrangement. We need to document and preserve these materials, but we recognize your legal ownership of the property and the unique circumstances of this discovery." Professor Hargrove continued, "What Dr. Marshall is suggesting is a cooperative approach. We would provide immediate assistance with your building's structural issues, engineering support, preservation specialists, renovation grants, resources to stabilize both the bakery and the documents." "In exchange?" Rachel asked, skeptical but interested. "In exchange for your cooperation in allowing our experts to properly examine and authenticate the documents," Dr. Marshall explained. "No removal without proper documentation and agreement. Your rights as property owner would be respected throughout the process." The offer was tempting, particularly given Rachel's limited resources for addressing the extensive renovation needs. Still, she sensed there was more to their urgency than simple historical interest. "Why the rush?" she asked directly. "These documents have been hidden for over 150 years. Professor Hargrove's expression became more serious. "Two reasons, Miss Turner. First, proper conservation is time-sensitive once documents are disturbed from stable conditions. Second, rumors have already begun circulating about a significant Civil War discovery in Millfield." From outside came the sound of additional vehicles arriving. Through the bakery windows, Rachel could see official historical society vans and equipment, resources far beyond what she could afford or access independently. "They're mobilizing significant resources," Meredith observed quietly to Rachel. "Whatever is in that box, they consider it extremely important." Rachel weighed her options carefully. The bakery required extensive work far exceeding her limited budget. The structural issues were worse than she had initially estimated. Yet this discovery potentially represented leverage, a way to ensure Hartwick's Bakery's preservation rather than just her temporary financial survival. "I'll cooperate under certain conditions," she finally stated, meeting Dr. Marshall's gaze directly. "Your team helps secure the building from further deterioration. Nothing leaves the premises without my knowledge and consent. And most importantly, whatever historical significance is confirmed becomes part of Hartwick's Bakery's official record and preservation status." Professor Hargrove leaned forward, clearly intrigued. "You're thinking of pursuing historical landmark designation," Rachel nodded. "This building represents my entire financial investment. If these documents are as significant as you believe, they should help secure Hartwick's Bakery's future as a protected historical site, rather than just another convenience store." Dr. Marshall considered this for a moment before extending her hand. "Those terms are reasonable. We'll need to formalize the arrangement, but given the historical significance, we can proceed with verbal agreement while our legal team prepares proper documentation." As they shook hands, Rachel felt a strange mix of apprehension and hope. What had begun as a desperate last-chance investment had suddenly become entangled with Civil War secrets and national historical interests. The direction of her future had shifted dramatically in the space of an hour, from simply fighting against structural decay to potentially presiding over a nationally significant historical discovery. Outside, preservation specialists were already unloading equipment, preparing to secure both the bakery and its unexpected historical treasure from further deterioration. Within the hour, Hartwick's Bakery transformed from an abandoned, crumbling storefront into the center of a coordinated historical preservation operation, all because of what might lie within that century-old metal box, hidden beneath the kitchen floor. The true nature of her discovery and how it would reshape her future remained bound within pages that had been patiently waiting for over 100 years, ready to reveal secrets that could rewrite history and just possibly save Rachel from financial ruin. The termite-damaged floorboards in the kitchen had been carefully removed, revealing the metal box in its hiding place beneath what had once been Hartwick's Premier Bakery. Rachel Turner stood at the edge of the excavation, watching as preservation specialists in white cotton gloves meticulously photographed each document before placing them in acid-free archival sleeves. The journal bearing General Wellington's insignia lay open on a specially designed conservation table, its yellowed pages revealing tactical notes and personal observations written in the General's distinctive flowing script. "These aren't just any battle plans," Professor Hargrove said, his voice hushed with academic reverence as he studied the documents through specialized magnifying equipment. "These are Wellington's original flanking strategies for the Battle of Millfield Creek, the maneuver that military historians have debated for generations." Rachel observed the professor's careful examination, still processing the surreal turn of events that had transformed her desperate financial gamble into the center of historical excitement. Just 24 hours earlier, she had been a bankrupt widow facing imminent homelessness. Now she stood surrounded by preservation experts, historians, and museum conservators, all focused intently on documents found beneath her failing bakery's floor. "The authenticity is undeniable," Dr. Marshall confirmed, comparing the handwriting to authenticated Wellington letters displayed on her tablet. "The paper composition, ink chemical signature, and penmanship all match known Wellington documents. What we're seeing here is the missing piece of Civil War tactical history." Outside, the transformation of Hartwick's Bakery continued at remarkable speed. The Historical Preservation Office had mobilized emergency stabilization teams to address the building's most critical structural issues. Temporary supports braced weakened ceiling joists while conservation architects meticulously documented every original feature of the pre-Civil War structure. Through the windows, Rachel could see curious onlookers gathering across the street, their numbers growing as word spread throughout Millfield about the historic discovery. Local news vans had already arrived, reporters setting up cameras aimed at the bakery's weathered facade. "The maps are extraordinary," Professor Hargrove continued, carefully turning the brittle paper with conservation tools. "Look at these notations about the terrain south of Millfield Creek. Wellington identified a crossing point that doesn't appear on any official military maps from the period." Dr. Marshall nodded, her professional demeanor momentarily cracking to reveal genuine historical excitement. "This completely revises our understanding of how Union forces managed to outflank Confederate positions. The traditional account has been wrong for 150 years. As the experts continued their examination, Meredith approached Rachel, stepping carefully around the equipment that now filled the bakery's front room. "Channel 5 wants an interview," she said quietly. "And the mayor called. He's thrilled about this tremendous opportunity for Millfield and wants to stop by this afternoon." Rachel smiled wryly. 24 hours ago, he wouldn't return my calls about permit questions. Amazing how finding 150-year-old war documents changes your popularity, Meredith observed with characteristic bluntness. Jackson Rivera entered from the back of the building, conferring with the structural engineers who had been assessing the bakery's foundation. Unlike the academic excitement of the historians, his focus remained practical, the physical stability of the building that housed the remarkable discovery. "East wall needs immediate reinforcement," he reported to Rachel. "They've identified active water infiltration that's compromising the original brick. The good news is the main support beams are solid oak. They don't build with materials like that anymore." The preservation team had set up temporary lighting throughout the bakery, illuminating decades of neglect, but also revealing glimpses of the building's original charm. Ornate crown molding partially hidden beneath layers of paint. The faded, but still visible, Hartwick's quality baked goods lettering on the wall behind the counter. A young historian approached Rachel hesitantly, holding a tablet with digital images of the documents. "Miss Turner, we've begun transcribing General Wellington's journal entries. There's something you should see." The historian navigated to a specific page, where Wellington's handwriting described his decision to entrust his tactical documents to Hartwick. Samuel Hartwick proves himself the most trustworthy of men. As quartermaster, he has demonstrated exceptional discretion and loyalty. With rumors of Confederate sympathizers in town and my imminent departure for the front, I have entrusted my private tactical journals and maps to his safekeeping. He has devised an ingenious hiding place beneath his establishment, known only to the two of us. Should misfortune befall me, Hartwick will ensure these documents reach General Grant. Rachel read the passage with growing wonder, realizing she was seeing a first-hand account of the very hiding place they had discovered. The connection across time felt almost tangible, Wellington's words describing the secret compartment in which they had been hidden, finally discovered generations later. "There's more," the historian said, scrolling to another entry dated 3 days later. This appears to be Wellington's last entry before the Battle of Millfield Creek. The journal entry described Wellington's final preparations for the battle that would become his legacy and reveal the significance of the documents. Rachel had found, "Tomorrow we advance toward Millfield Creek. Should our flanking maneuver succeed, we will have secured the railway junction critical to the Western campaign. I leave these papers with Hartwick as insurance against capture, containing as they do not only our tactical approach, but intelligence on Confederate positions that must not fall into enemy hands. My wound from Chattanooga troubles me still, but duty calls us forward." Wellington was wounded at Millfield Creek and evacuated north, Professor Hargrove explained, joining them. He never returned to retrieve his documents, and Hartwick died of typhoid fever before the war's end. The secret of their hiding place died with them until today. As the historical significance of her discovery continued to unfold, Rachel felt a growing sense of responsibility. These weren't just documents that might save her from financial ruin. They represented a lost piece of American history that had been entrusted to her through extraordinary circumstances. The bell above the bakery door jangled as a distinguished woman in her 50s entered, accompanied by an aide carrying a portfolio. Despite the chaos of equipment and preservation activities, she moved with confident purpose, directly approaching Dr. Marshall. "Catherine, the news reached Richmond this morning," she said without preamble. "The governor sends his personal interest in this discovery." Dr. Marshall straightened visibly. "Director Abernathy, this is unexpected. We've only just begun the authentication process. When Wellington's missing battle plans surface after 150 years, it becomes a priority," Director Abernathy replied before turning her attention to Rachel. "Ms. Turner? I'm Elizabeth Abernathy, Director of the State Museum of History. I understand we have you to thank for preserving a significant piece of American military history." "I just bought a failing bakery," Rachel replied, somewhat dazed by this latest development. Finding Civil War battle plans wasn't exactly in my renovation budget. A hint of genuine amusement crossed the director's face. Nonetheless, your discovery has immense historical significance. General Wellington's Riverside Campaign established military tactics that West Point still teaches today. She gestured toward the documents being carefully examined. These papers fill crucial gaps in our understanding of Civil War military strategy. The State Museum, in conjunction with the Historical Preservation Office, would like to discuss a formal arrangement that benefits both historical preservation and your personal situation. Rachel felt a sudden wariness. Throughout this extraordinary day, she had maintained some control over her discovery. The director's arrival suggested the stakes and the government's interest were even higher than she had realized. "What kind of arrangement?" she asked cautiously. Director Abernathy nodded to her aide, who opened the portfolio embossed with the State Museum seal. "A proposal that acknowledges both the historical significance of these documents and your ownership. Rights to the property where they were discovered." She removed several documents and continued, "The State Museum, in partnership with the Historical Preservation Trust, would like to designate Hartwick's Bakery as a state historical landmark with specific focus on its significance to Civil War history." Rachel processed this information, understanding its potential impact on her precarious financial situation. Historical landmark designation would protect the bakery from development, potentially securing both its future and her investment. The designation would come with substantial restoration grants. Director Abernathy continued, "Sufficient to return Hartwick's Bakery to its original condition. Additionally, we propose establishing the Wellington Hartwick Center for Civil War History here on the premises, a research facility and museum open to scholars and the public." The scope of the proposal was breathtaking. What had begun as Rachel's desperate last stand against financial ruin was transforming into something far beyond her initial hopes of simply restoring the bakery for a modest business. "And my role in this?" Rachel asked, sensing there must be more to the arrangement. "We would like to offer you the position of site director," the director stated. "Your background in educational administration before your husband's passing makes you uniquely qualified. The position includes residence rights to the renovated second-floor apartment, and acquisition includes residence rights and a substantial annual salary funded through the historical trust." Rachel felt momentarily dizzy as the pieces fell into place. Her previous career, abandoned during her husband's illness and the subsequent financial collapse, had been in educational program management. Director Abernathy's staff had clearly conducted thorough background research. "This is overwhelming," Rachel admitted, looking around at the deteriorating bakery that was apparently being offered as the centerpiece of a new historical institution with herself at its helm. "Take time to consider," Director Abernathy advised. "The formal proposal includes all details regarding funding, restoration timelines, and your contractual position. For now, we need your permission to transfer the documents to proper conservation facilities while maintaining clear records of their provenance and your discovery rights." As afternoon faded into evening, Rachel found herself signing temporary custody agreements for the documents while being assured of her central role in their future presentation and interpretation. The day's extraordinary events, from desperate property assessment to Civil War document discovery to a personal offer from the State Museum director, had transformed her circumstances so completely that she struggled to process the implications. Standing in the bakery's small side garden as twilight settled over Millfield, Rachel was joined by Meredith, who had worked tirelessly throughout the day, helping coordinate the sudden influx of officials and experts. "So," Meredith said simply, "Director of a state historical center. Quite a promotion from bankrupt widow with a crumbling bakery in less than 24 hours." Rachel gazed at the bakery's weathered brick exterior, seeing it now not as a desperate last investment, but as the setting for an institution of historical significance, with herself no longer fighting for survival but leading a prestigious historical center. Life changes in an instant, she replied quietly. Yesterday, I was facing homelessness. Today I'm being offered the chance to preserve history and rebuild my life simultaneously. As preservation personnel continued their work inside the bakery, Rachel allowed herself a moment to absorb the transformation of her circumstances, a transformation as dramatic and unexpected as the Civil War secrets that had lain hidden beneath her feet, waiting for precisely the right moment to emerge from darkness into light. The question is, Meredith said, ever practical, what happens next? They're offering you everything you need, financial stability, housing, purpose. But it's also binding your future to this place completely. Rachel considered this perspective, watching as additional preservation specialists arrived with specialized equipment for documenting the bakery's original architectural features. Sometimes the path forward appears in the most unexpected places, she said. Daniel always said opportunity doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It slips in through the back door when you're busy looking elsewhere. The mention of her late husband brought a moment of reflection. The financial disaster he had inadvertently left behind had driven her to this desperate purchase, which had now opened an entirely new future she could never have anticipated. He would have loved this, Rachel said softly. The history, the discovery, the second chance emerging from seeming disaster. Inside the bakery, the preservation team had set up powerful spotlights to continue their work into the evening. The illumination transformed the building's facade, highlighting architectural details long obscured by neglect. Neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk across the street, watching the unprecedented activity with curious excitement. Jackson approached, carrying architectural plans now marked with preservation notations. The structural team has completed their initial assessment, he reported. The foundation is better than we feared. These buildings were built to last. With proper restoration, Hartwick's could stand another century easily. Rachel noticed something different in Jackson's demeanor, a professional excitement that matched her own growing sense of possibility. You're enjoying this, she observed. He smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Watching history come alive? Seeing craftsmanship from 150 years ago finally getting the recognition it deserves? This is why I went into historical restoration in the first place. Their conversation was interrupted as Professor Hargrove hurried outside, clutching his tablet with evident excitement. Miss Turner, we found something extraordinary in Wellington's journal, something that changes everything about how we understand the Battle of Millfield Creek. He showed her the screen, where a high-resolution image displayed a page from Wellington's journal. The entry described not just military tactics, but a secret meeting with Confederate deserters who had provided critical intelligence about enemy positions. This reveals that Wellington's famous flanking maneuver wasn't just brilliant strategy. It was based on intelligence from Confederate soldiers who opposed the war's continuation after Gettysburg, the professor explained. This completely revises our understanding of why the maneuver succeeded. The historical implications were clearly significant, but Rachel was struck by the human element of the story, the untold courage of those who had risked everything to end the conflict. Sooner, their contribution erased from official histories until this moment. History is always more complicated than the simplified versions we learn, she observed. More human, with all the messy courage and contradiction that implies. Professor Hargrove nodded appreciatively. Precisely why these documents are so valuable. They give us the unfiltered reality, not the sanitized account that made it into official records. As night fell completely, temporary lighting illuminated the bakery like a stage set. News crews had set up across the street, broadcasting live updates about the historic discovery. Local residents continued to gather, their numbers growing. As word spread throughout the small town, Mayor Thompson's car pulled up, the town's political leader emerging with an entourage of council members, all eager to associate themselves with what was quickly becoming Millfield's most significant historical event in generations. "Ms. Turner," the mayor called, approaching with hand extended and camera-ready smile in place. "What a tremendous day for our community. The historical significance of your discovery cannot be overstated." Rachel accepted his handshake with gracious restraint, recalling how the same official had dismissed her permit questions just days earlier. "It's been quite unexpected," she replied simply. "The town council is prepared to fast-track any permissions needed for the restoration." He continued enthusiastically. "Millfield stands ready to support this historical treasure in every way possible." As the mayor launched into what sounded like a practice speech about historical preservation and community heritage, Rachel caught Meredith's knowing glance. They both recognized the political opportunism at work, but also understood that such support would prove valuable for the bakery's future. Director Abernathy emerged from the bakery, joining their conversation with purposeful authority that subtly redirected the mayor's attention. "Mayor Thompson, the State Museum appreciates Millfield's enthusiasm. We'll need coordinated support as we develop the Wellington Hartwick Center. Perhaps your office could help facilitate community engagement sessions in the coming weeks." The director's diplomatic redirection impressed Rachel, acknowledging the mayor's importance while channeling his energy toward constructive purposes rather than mere publicity. As the officials discussed logistics, Rachel stepped away, needing a moment of quiet to process the day's extraordinary developments. She found herself in the bakery's back garden, a small overgrown space where moonlight illuminated remnants of what had once been a kitchen herb garden. Jackson found her there, respectfully maintaining distance while offering silent companionship as she contemplated the whirlwind transformation of her circumstances. "When I bid on this place," Rachel said eventually, "I thought I was crazy. Spending my last dollars on a building that might be beyond saving. Everyone told me to walk away." "Sometimes the biggest risks bring the most unexpected rewards," Jackson observed. "Though I doubt anyone could have predicted Civil War battle plans beneath the kitchen floor." Rachel smiled. Life has a strange way of revealing pathways just when all doors seem closed. The quiet moment was interrupted by Meredith, who appeared with 3 cups of coffee from the shop across the street. "Fair warning," she said, handing them each a cup. "Reporter from the historical magazine wants an interview. The preservation team needs decisions about original features versus modern necessities, and Director Abernathy is talking about a formal announcement ceremony tomorrow." Rachel took a deep breath, accepting both the coffee and the responsibilities that had arrived so unexpectedly. "From bankruptcy to historical landmark director in 24 hours, she said with a hint of wonder. "I'm not sure I've fully processed that this is really happening." "It's happening," Meredith confirmed. "And while it's an amazing opportunity, it's also going to be a marathon, not a sprint. They're talking about a year-long restoration process, developing educational programs, cataloging artifacts. Building something meaningful takes time," Jackson added. "Just like the original construction of this place in the 1850s, Hartwick didn't know his bakery would someday house secret war documents or become a historical center, but he built it to last anyway." This perspective resonated with Rachel. The building that had seemed like her last desperate gamble was revealing itself as something far more significant, a container for history that had patiently waited for the right moment to reveal its secrets. As they returned to the front of the bakery, the scene had transformed yet again. Powerful lights had been set up for a formal press conference, with Dr. Marshall and Professor Hargrove preparing to address the growing crowd of journalists and community members. Director Abernathy approached Rachel. "We'd like you to join the announcement. After all, this discovery wouldn't have happened without your decision to purchase and investigate this building." Rachel hesitated, still adjusting to her sudden transformation from anonymous bankruptcy victim to central figure in a major historical discovery. "What should I say?" she asked, genuinely uncertain of her role in the unfolding narrative. "Just share your authentic experience," the director advised. "How it felt to discover these documents, what this building means to you, your vision for its future as part of our shared historical legacy." As Rachel took her place beside the historical experts, cameras focused on the unlikely group standing before the weathered facade of Hartwick's Bakery. The building that had seemed like a foolish last stand against financial ruin now stood illuminated, literally and figuratively, its historical significance finally recognized after generations of obscurity. Professor Hargrove spoke first, explaining the historical significance of Wellington's battle plans with academic precision. Dr. Marshall followed, outlining the authentication process and preliminary findings about the document's contents. Finally, Director Abernathy announced the preliminary agreement to establish the Wellington Hartwick Center for Civil War History. Then, with surprising nervousness, Rachel stepped forward to address the gathered crowd. Looking out at the faces of community members, journalists, officials, and historians, she found her voice. "Yesterday, I was a bankrupt widow with nothing but this crumbling building between me and homelessness," she began with unflinching honesty. "Today, I stand before you as the guardian of a historical treasure that changes our understanding of a pivotal moment in American history." She gestured to the bakery behind her. Hartwick's wasn't just a bakery. It was a witness to history, a keeper of secrets, and now, a gateway to understanding our past more completely. What seemed like the end of my story has become a new beginning, not just for me, but for this building and the history it protected for over 150 years. As cameras flashed and reporters called questions, Rachel felt a profound shift in her understanding of value and opportunity. The true worth of her desperate purchase had nothing to do with real estate or business potential. It lay in the historical connections that had been patiently waiting to be discovered, in the stories that would now be preserved rather than lost to time. The failing bakery that had represented her last financial hope had revealed itself to be something far more valuable, a physical connection to a pivotal moment in history, a bridge between past and future, and the foundation for a second chance she could never have imagined. 3 months after the discovery of General Wellington's hidden battle plans, Hartwick's Bakery stood transformed. The summer heat had given way to crisp, autumn breezes that rustled through the newly restored garden were interpretive signs now. Guided visitors through the history of Civil War-era food preparation and supply logistics. Scaffolding embraced the building's brick exterior, where master craftspeople meticulously repointed original mortar using historically accurate techniques. The once wrought-in wooden sign had been painstakingly restored, its gold lettering gleaming in the October sunlight. Rachel Turner stood in what had once been the water-damaged kitchen, now carefully reconstructed to showcase both its 1860s appearance and the famous hiding place beneath the floor. Before her, architectural plans were spread across a massive table where a team of preservation specialists, historians, and museum designers engaged in animated discussion about the final exhibition layout for the Wellington Hartwick Center for Civil War History. "The tactical map display needs more space," argued Dr. Eliza Chun, the museum development specialist who had joined the project from the Smithsonian. "Modern visitors expect to see the battlefield context, not just the documents themselves." "But we can't compromise the original kitchen configuration," countered Jackson, now officially the restoration director for the entire project. "Those brick ovens are mentioned specifically in Hartwick's correspondence with Wellington about feeding the troops." Rachel listened to the debate with a small smile, still adjusting to her role as mediator between historical authenticity and visitor engagement. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of activity as Director Abernathy's proposal transformed from concept to reality with remarkable speed. Congressional interest in the discovery had accelerated funding approvals, while academic excitement about the document's contents had attracted world-class talent to the project. We can preserve the kitchen's integrity while still accommodating the tactical displays, Rachel suggested, indicating an alternative space on the blueprints. The former storage room has the necessary square footage and fewer original features to consider. Both specialists nodded in agreement. Another small victory in the delicate balancing act Rachel navigated daily. Her previous educational administration experience had proven unexpectedly valuable, though nothing in her career had prepared her for managing a project of this magnitude and historical significance. Meredith entered the kitchen, tablet in hand. Her role had evolved from supportive friend to official communications director for the center, a position that had been Rachel's first executive decision. Recognizing that Meredith's practical efficiency and media background made her perfect for managing the growing public interest in Hartwick's bakery. "The governor's office just confirmed," Meredith announced. "He'll attend the official opening ceremony next month. They're sending an advance team next week to begin security preparations." This news sent a ripple of excitement through the room. Gubernatorial attendance would guarantee statewide media coverage and elevate the center's profile significantly. "That's 2 weeks earlier than we expected," Rachel noted, mentally recalculating timelines. "Can we be ready?" Jackson consulted his detailed project management software. "The exterior restoration will be complete. The main exhibition spaces in the East Wing are on schedule. The document vault recreation is ahead of schedule. Actually, it's the West Wing interior that concerns me. Those rooms won't be fully restored. We can adjust the opening tour route," Rachel decided. "Focus on the completed areas and the document exhibition. The conservation lab can remain behind the scenes for now." As the team dispersed to continue their various tasks, Rachel took a moment to walk through the bakery alone, something she tried to do daily despite her packed schedule. These quiet moments helped her maintain perspective on the extraordinary journey from desperation to purpose that had defined her past year. She made her way to the front room, now fully restored with period-appropriate furnishings and climate control systems, hidden discreetly within the historical architecture. The space had become her favorite retreat, not just for its beauty, but for its connection to the discovery that had changed everything. Professor Hargrove looked up from a desk where he was examining digital scans of Wellington's correspondence. As the university's lead historian on the project, he divided his time between campus and Hartwick's bakery, coordinating the academic analysis of the document's contents. "Rachel, perfect timing. We've just decoded another of Wellington's cipher passages," he announced, his academic excitement evident. The Riverside campaign was even more strategically complex than historians realized. Wellington was simultaneously managing 3 separate intelligence networks while publicly maintaining that he had insufficient information about enemy positions. Rachel joined him at the desk, genuinely interested in these historical revelations that continued to emerge from the documents. What had begun as simply a financial opportunity had evolved into intellectual fascination with the historical narrative unfolding from her discovery. "Have you found any more references to Hartwick's role?" she asked, having developed particular interest in the original baker's position as confidant and keeper of military secrets. "Indeed," Professor Hargrove replied, indicating a passage on his screen. "This letter essentially confirms that Hartwick created the hiding place, specifically at Wellington's request, after a security breach at headquarters in 1863. Wellington no longer trusted official channels for his most sensitive correspondence." This information added another layer to Rachel's connection with the property. Samuel Hartwick had faced his own impossible choice between official protocols and his personal commitment to preserving historically vital information. His decision, made over a century ago, had created the opportunity now reshaping her life. Professor Hargrove called a young researcher from across the room. We found something unusual in the tactical assessment from Nashville. Can you bring the high-resolution scan?" As the historian excused himself to investigate, Rachel continued her walk through the bakery, climbing the newly restored staircase to the second floor. Here renovation crews worked on converting former storage rooms into research spaces and administrative offices. The rear apartment had been designated as Rachel's private residence, part of her compensation package as center director, though renovations there had been prioritized below the public spaces. The master bedroom still, in the early stages of restoration, offered a commanding view of Millfield's historic district. From this vantage point, Rachel could see the positive ripple effect their project was having on the surrounding area. Inspired by the bakery's transformation, neighboring businesses had begun their own restoration efforts. The hardware store across the street sported fresh paint in historically accurate colors, while the former apothecary 2 doors down had removed the modern aluminum storefront to reveal original woodwork beneath. Her phone chimed with a message from Jackson. "Found something interesting in the basement. Can you come down?" Intrigued, Rachel made her way back downstairs and through the front room, now arranged to showcase bakery operations during the Civil War era. The basement, once a damp storage area, had been completely transformed. Modern climate control systems had been installed, structural reinforcements added, and the space reorganized to accommodate mechanical equipment while preserving historical elements. She found Jackson near a section of original foundation wall, carefully examining the stonework with a specialized light. "What did you find?" Rachel asked as she approached. Jackson indicated a section of stone where removal of later additions had revealed original masonry. The restoration team removed the modern concrete overlay and found this. Embedded in the original foundation stones was a small metal plate, tarnished with age but clearly intentional. Engraved on its surface was a quote, "In times of conflict, truth becomes the first casualty. Preserve it well for those who follow." SH 1863. "It's like they knew," Rachel said softly, kneeling to examine the plate more closely. "They created this hiding place, expecting the documents would eventually be found, just not in their lifetime. A message across time. They preserved these documents for future generations," Jackson agreed, trusting someone would eventually understand their importance. The discovery of this small acknowledgement, this intentional message from the past, affected Rachel deeply. It reinforced the sense of purpose that had been growing within her since accepting leadership of the center. She wasn't just salvaging her own future. She was fulfilling the intentions of those who had created this historical repository over a century ago. "We should incorporate this into the exhibition," she decided. "It captures the essence of what we're trying to communicate about Wellington and Hartwick's foresight." As they discussed possibilities, Rachel's phone rang. The screen displayed Director Abernathy, a call she couldn't ignore regardless of the discovery. Her financial desperation had led to an impulsive decision. That decision had placed her in precisely the right location to discover hidden historical treasures. That discovery had attracted resources and opportunities beyond anything she could have imagined. The next morning brought a frenzy of activity as news of the governor's expanded plans filtered through the project teams. Additional security preparations were implemented, exhibition timelines accelerated, and media strategies revised to accommodate the heightened profile of the opening ceremony. Rachel found herself in back-to-back meetings with government officials, academic partners, and institutional representatives, all eager to align with what was quickly becoming a prestigious state initiative. Through it all, she maintained a clear focus on the center's core mission: preserving and interpreting the historical significance of the Wellington documents while honoring the foresight of those who had secured them for future generations. During a rare, quiet moment in the afternoon, Rachel returned to the front room where Professor Hargrove was supervising the Installation of climate-controlled display cases for the most fragile documents. These cases are remarkable, she observed. Examining the nearly invisible technology maintaining precise environmental conditions within elegant, historically appropriate cabinetry. State-of-the-art, Professor Hargrove agreed. The same systems used for the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. Another benefit of the governor's interest in our little project. Rachel smiled at the characterization. What had begun as discovering a hidden box in a failing bakery had expanded beyond anyone's expectations, drawing increasing resources and attention as its significance became clear. "I've been thinking about Samuel Hartwick," she said, glancing around the bakery that had once been his livelihood. What courage it must have taken to establish this secret archive. He risked his reputation and safety to preserve historical truth. Professor Hargrove nodded thoughtfully. The civilian's eternal dilemma during wartime, balancing safety against principle, immediate security against long-term interests. Hartwick and Wellington chose a middle path, not destruction. Not exposure, but preservation for a future they believed would come. And it did, Rachel observed, just not in their lifetime. That's the essence of genuine historical stewardship, the historian replied. Taking actions whose value may not be recognized in your own time, trusting that future generations will understand what you protected and why. This perspective resonated deeply with Rachel. Her own actions, purchasing a ruined bakery with her last resources, had seemed foolish to others at the time. Yet that decision, born of desperation, rather than historical foresight, had created the conditions for an important discovery and preservation effort. As she continued her rounds of the property, Rachel encountered teams of workers throughout the building and grounds, all focused on preparing for the rapidly approaching opening ceremony. Carpenters restored ornate woodwork according to historical photographs. Electricians installed subtle lighting to highlight architectural features. Conservators prepared climate-controlled exhibition spaces for the documents themselves. In the former storefront, now transformed into the main exhibition hall, Meredith was directing the installation of interpretive panels that would guide visitors through the story of Wellington's campaign, Hartwick's role as confidant, and the century-long journey of the hidden documents. "We've adjusted the narrative to incorporate the governor's new initiative," Meredith explained, showing Rachel the updated introduction panel. The exhibition now frames the Wellington documents as the foundation of an ongoing state effort rather than simply a remarkable historical discovery. Rachel reviewed the text, impressed by how Meredith had elevated the significance without losing the personal elements of the story, including the dramatic discovery that had captivated initial media interest. "You've maintained the human element while expanding the historical context," she observed. "Visitors will connect with both the Civil War figures and the modern discovery narrative." "That's the balance we need," Meredith agreed. "People remember stories about people, not just abstract historical concepts." The drama of a bankrupt widow finding Civil War secrets in her bakery floor creates an entry point for visitors to engage with the broader historical significance. As Rachel continued through the exhibition space, she found herself reflected in the narrative being constructed, her desperate purchase transformed into a pivotal moment of historical preservation. The story being told wasn't just about Wellington and Hartwick, but about the continuous thread of preservation and discovery that had ultimately led to this moment of recognition. In that realization, Rachel found a deeper significance to her journey. What had begun as merely personal survival had evolved into something that would outlast her, a contribution to historical understanding that would inform and inspire long after her own story was forgotten. The failing bakery she had purchased out of desperation had become not just her salvation, but her legacy. Later that afternoon, Rachel met with the educational programming team that would develop curriculum materials for school groups visiting the center. The team included local teachers, university education specialists, and museum professionals, all focused on making the Wellington documents accessible to students of various ages. "We want to move beyond simply presenting facts about the Civil War," explained Dr. Maya Williams, the education director recruited from a prestigious museum in Washington. "Students should understand how individual decisions like Hartwick, hiding these documents, can impact historical understanding generations later." Rachel appreciated this approach. It's about connecting past choices to present discovery, helping students see history not as inevitable, but as shaped by human decisions in moments of crisis. The conversation shifted to practical considerations: age-appropriate activities, interactive elements, connections to state curriculum standards. Throughout the discussion, Rachel found herself drawing on her previous educational experience while also incorporating the personal insights gained through her extraordinary journey from bankruptcy to historical preservation. "We should include elements about preservation itself," she suggested. "How historical understanding depends on the physical survival of documents and artifacts. Many students have never considered how fragile our connections to the past actually are." As the meeting concluded, Jackson arrived with updated restoration timelines. While most of the project remained on schedule, supply chain issues were threatening to delay completion of certain historical reproductions needed for the kitchen display. "The hand-forged hardware is the main concern," he explained. "There are only 3 blacksmiths in the country who can create historically accurate reproductions of 1860s hinges and latches." Rachel considered the options. "What if we approach this as an educational opportunity? Invite one of the blacksmiths to do a public demonstration during the opening. Visitors could watch the traditional techniques while we complete the installation." Jackson nodded appreciatively, turning a potential problem into a feature. "That's why you're running this place." "Necessity is the mother of improvisation," Rachel replied with a smile. "Something I've become quite familiar with lately." As evening approached, Rachel took a final walk through the bakery. Construction teams had departed for the day, leaving behind the tangible progress of their efforts: freshly plastered walls, restored woodwork, carefully reconstructed historical elements. The transformation from crumbling ruin to emerging historical center was increasingly visible. In the quiet of the building, Rachel could almost sense the layered history surrounding her. Samuel Hartwick baking bread for Union soldiers, General Wellington entrusting his secret plans to a civilian shopkeeper, the documents waiting patiently through decades of obscurity until chance and desperation revealed them once more. Director Abernathy arrived for their scheduled meeting, carrying a portfolio containing the latest project updates. Her initial skepticism about Rachel's qualifications had evolved into genuine respect as she witnessed Rachel's dedication and growing expertise. The Budget Committee approved the expanded educational wing, the director announced as they settled into the temporary office space. "Construction can begin next month, assuming the Historical Commission approvals come through on schedule." From trying to save a failing bakery to planning a state-funded educational facility, Rachel marveled. Quite a journey in just 3 months. The director studied her thoughtfully. "You know, when we first met, I wondered if you were up to this challenge. Taking someone from financial crisis to directing a historical center seemed risky, regardless of your background." Rachel appreciated the candor. "I wondered the same thing myself. There were moments when I thought I'd made another terrible decision accepting this position. Yet here we are," Director Abernathy observed. "The Wellington Hartwick Center is ahead of schedule, under budget, and already generating national academic interest. Sometimes the most unlikely candidates prove the most successful." Their conversation turned to preparations for the opening ceremony, scheduled to coincide with the annual Millfield Founders Day celebration. The governor's participation had elevated what would have been a local event into a state occasion. with attendant protocol requirements and security considerations. The governor wants to emphasize the economic revitalization aspect, Director Abernathy explained. How historical preservation can drive community renewal. Millfield is becoming something of a model for small-town revitalization through cultural heritage. Rachel nodded, having witnessed this effect firsthand. Since work began on Hartwick's bakery, 3 neighboring businesses had undertaken their own restoration projects. Tourism inquiries had increased dramatically. Property values throughout the historic district had stabilized after years of decline. It's remarkable how preserving the past can secure the future, she observed. Not just for the buildings themselves, but for entire communities. After the director departed, Rachel climbed the stairs to her partially renovated apartment. While most of the center's public spaces were nearing completion, her personal living quarters remained a work in progress, much like her own journey from financial disaster to unexpected purpose. The apartment's front windows overlooked Millfield's Main Street, where evening visitors now strolled past illuminated shop windows and historically accurate street lamps. When Rachel had first purchased the bakery, this same street had featured vacant storefronts and little pedestrian activity. Now energy and purpose had returned to the historic district. A knock at the door revealed Jackson, carrying building plans and a bakery box from the new coffee shop across the street. "Peace offering," he explained, indicating the pastries. "I need to discuss some last-minute changes to the exhibition layout." Rachel welcomed him in, clearing space on her makeshift dining table for the plans and the unexpected treat. "Apparently our discovery inspired more than historical interest," Jackson commented, opening the box to reveal pastries decorated with Civil War motifs. "The new bakery is doing a Wellington cookie and a Hartwick cinnamon roll." Rachel laughed, the sound echoing in the partially finished space. "History becomes commerce. I suppose that's better than being forgotten entirely." As they reviewed the necessary exhibition adjustments, Rachel found herself reflecting on the unexpected partnership that had developed over the past months. Jackson's expertise and commitment had been crucial to the project's success, his practical knowledge balancing her administrative skills in a complementary way neither could have anticipated. "I've been meaning to thank you," she said as they finalized the changes. "That first day when I showed you this crumbling disaster of a building, you could have told me it was hopeless. Most contractors would have." Jackson considered this, his weathered face thoughtful in the apartment's soft lighting. "I've restored buildings for 30 years. Sometimes the ones that seem furthest gone are the ones most worth saving. They've survived this long for a reason." The observation struck Rachel as applicable to more than just architecture. Her own life had seemed beyond restoration after Daniel's death and the financial collapse that followed. Yet here she stood, rebuilding not just a historic structure, but her own future. Second chances come in unexpected forms, she reflected, for buildings and people both. The following morning brought another milestone as the conservation team completed the custom display case for Wellington's journal, the centerpiece of the exhibition and the document that had revealed the general's strategic thinking most clearly. Rachel watched as the conservators delicately positioned the journal, its pages open to Wellington's entry from the day before the Battle of Millfield Creek. The general's handwriting, flowing yet precise, recorded his hopes for the upcoming engagement and his gratitude to Samuel Hartwick for safeguarding his confidential battle plans. "We've analyzed the ink composition," explained Dr. Leslie Rivera, the lead conservator. "It matches other authenticated Wellington documents perfectly, no question about provenance." The scientific confirmation seemed almost superfluous to Rachel now. After months immersed in Wellington's writings, she had developed an almost personal connection to the general and his civilian confidant. Their voices across time had become familiar through the documents they had so carefully preserved. "Wellington never knew if his strategy would succeed," she observed, studying the journal entry. "He recorded his doubts here alongside his determination. It makes him more human somehow." That's the magic of primary sources, Dr. Rivera agreed. They show historical figures as they really were, uncertain, hopeful, afraid, not as the marble statues they later became. This human dimension was what Rachel hoped visitors would connect with, not just the military significance or historical importance, but the very human choices made in moments of crisis and uncertainty. Choices that had consequences reaching far beyond what their makers could have imagined. As final preparations for the opening ceremony accelerated, Rachel found herself at the center of increasing public attention. Local newspapers featured profiles of the bakery lady whose desperate purchase had uncovered historical treasure. Regional television stations requested interviews about the remarkable journey from bankruptcy to historical discovery. Meredith had become adept at managing these requests, filtering them through the center's communication strategy, while protecting Rachel from the most intrusive inquiries. Channel 9 wants to do a feature on your personal financial collapse, Meredith reported with characteristic bluntness. I told them we're focusing on the historical significance, not your bank statements. Rachel appreciated this protection. While her financial disaster was now an essential part of the discovery narrative, she had no desire to have the painful details of Daniel's gambling debts and her subsequent bankruptcy examined as public entertainment. The governor's advance team arrives tomorrow, Meredith continued, checking her tablet. They'll need a complete walkthrough of the ceremony space and security briefing. As Rachel reviewed the final preparations, she realized how completely her life had transformed in just 3 months. The desperate widow facing eviction had become a respected historical center director. The failing bakery purchased with her last dollars had become a state-designated landmark with national historical significance. Yet amid this transformation, she recognized that the core elements remained consistent. The same determination that had driven her desperate bakery purchase now fueled her leadership of the center. The same attention to detail that had characterized her former career now informed her approach to historical presentation. Her circumstances had changed dramatically, but her fundamental strengths had simply found new expression, redirected from survival to purpose in a way she could never have anticipated when standing before the crumbling bakery at the tax auction, clutching her last $450 like a lifeline. That evening, as twilight settled over Millfield, Rachel stood in the bakery's front room, now the Wellington Hartwick exhibition hall, and watched as the final display cases were secured in place. Tomorrow would bring officials, media, attention, and public recognition. But tonight, in the quiet of the nearly completed center, she took a moment to appreciate the journey that had brought her here. From the devastating loss of her husband to financial ruin, from desperate last-chance purchase to historical discovery, from the brink of homelessness to leading a prestigious institution, each painful step had somehow led precisely where she needed to be, though she could never have seen the path while walking it. The failing bakery that had represented her last financial hope had revealed itself to be something far more valuable, a physical connection to a pivotal moment in history, a bridge between past and future, and the foundation for a second chance she could never have imagined. As she prepared to leave for the night, Rachel paused at the special display containing her crowbar, the ordinary tool that had pried up the floorboards and changed everything. Beside it, a simple plaque told visitors, "Sometimes the greatest discoveries happen when we have nothing left to lose." 1 year after the Wellington Hartwick Center's grand opening, Rachel Turner stood at the window of her office watching as a group of 5th graders gathered on the lawn for a special educational program. The children clustered around interactive stations where graduate fellows demonstrated Civil War-era communication methods, from signal flags and cipher wheels to early telegraph systems. Their enthusiasm was visible even from a distance, hands raising eagerly to volunteer for each demonstration. The center had exceeded all expectations in its first year of operation. Visitor numbers had surpassed projections by nearly 50%. Research fellowship applications had flooded in from prestigious universities nationwide, and the educational programs had earned state recognition for innovation in historical engagement. What had begun as Rachel's desperate purchase of a failing bakery had blossomed into an institution with growing national significance. "The Smithsonian curator just confirmed," Meredith announced, entering with her characteristic efficiency. "They're bringing the traveling Wellington exhibition here next spring. Apparently, our documents have become essential context for understanding the Western theater operations." Rachel smiled, still occasionally struck by the surreal evolution of her circumstances. From bankruptcy to hosting Smithsonian exhibitions, life took unexpected turns. "Speaking of unexpected," Meredith continued, checking her tablet, "the National Historic Preservation Trust called. They're presenting you with their annual Leadership Award at the gala in Washington next month. The official announcement goes out tomorrow." This news gave Rachel pause. Professional recognition had begun arriving with increasing frequency: speaking invitations, board appointments, media profiles, all stemming from her leadership of the center. Yet she never forgot that her visionary leadership, as one publication had described it, had begun with the most desperate of financial gambles. "Time to head downstairs," Meredith reminded her. "The symposium opens in 20 minutes, and everyone's expecting remarks from the executive director." The International Symposium on Civil War Military Archives marked the center's one-year anniversary, bringing together historians, archivists, and military scholars to discuss the preservation and interpretation of battlefield documents. Three-day event would feature presentations on the Wellington papers and their impact on military historiography, as well as broader discussions about historical preservation in small communities. Rachel made her way through the center's beautifully restored corridors, now familiar pathways rather than the daunting damaged spaces she had first encountered. Hartwick's bakery had been transformed from a deteriorating ruin into a vibrant institution, its rooms filled daily with researchers, students, and visitors. Yet subtle reminders of its darkest days remained. A section of damaged flooring preserved beneath protective glass, showing visitors the original discovery site. A photograph in the entry hall documenting the bakery's condition at auction. A small display case containing the crowbar Rachel had used when first exploring the hidden compartment. The main exhibition hall, once a crumbling storefront with water-damaged ceilings and peeling paint, now featured state-of-the-art display technology concealed within restored 1860s architectural elements. The room was filled to capacity for the symposium opening, with academic leaders from major universities sitting alongside military historians and preservation specialists. As Rachel approached the podium, she surveyed the assembled experts with quiet amazement at the journey that had brought her to this moment. Her opening remarks acknowledged both the historical significance of the Wellington papers and the extraordinary circumstances of their discovery, weaving together the Civil War narrative of military strategy with the 21st century story of financial crisis and revelation. The Wellington Hartwick Center exists at the intersection of intention and circumstance, she noted, a theme she had often reflected upon. General Wellington and Samuel Hartwick intentionally preserved these documents for future understanding, creating a secure hiding place to protect information they deemed too sensitive for their own time, but too valuable to destroy. Yet the discovery of that hiding place required the precise circumstances that brought together a failing bakery, a desperate home buyer, and the revealing power of restoration to expose what had been hidden. Following her remarks, Professor Hargrove presented the symposium's keynote address, detailing how the Wellington documents had transformed scholarly understanding of Civil War military tactics. His presentation highlighted several major revelations that had emerged from the collection: secret communication with Union sympathizers behind Confederate lines that had provided critical intelligence, detailed terrain analysis that explained Wellington's famous flanking maneuver, Private reflections on the ethical dimensions of military deception. These documents have fundamentally altered our understanding of how battlefield decisions were made during a crucial campaign, Professor Hargrove explained. What we once viewed as simply brilliant tactical intuition, we now recognize as a sophisticated intelligence operation that shaped the Western theater operations for months afterward. As the day's sessions progressed, Rachel moved between presentations, engaging with scholars and officials while maintaining the delicate balance between institutional leadership and academic participation. The center she directed had quickly established itself as more than a repository of historical documents. It had become a nexus for new scholarship that connected Civil War, military history with contemporary understanding of intelligence operations. During the afternoon break, Rachel encountered Jackson in the exhibition hall, where he was explaining the architectural restoration process to a group of preservation specialists. Their professional collaboration had evolved alongside a deepening personal connection, another unexpected development in Rachel's transformed life. The water damage actually revealed original construction techniques that had been covered by later renovations. Jackson was explaining, indicating the exposed beamwork that had been carefully preserved. Sometimes deterioration creates opportunities for discovery. This observation, so aligned with Rachel's own experience, caught her attention. Jackson noticed her presence and concluded his explanation, joining her as the group moved to the next exhibition area. "You've been quoted by preservation specialists," she noted with amusement. "Your restoration work here has made you something of a celebrity in historical architecture circles." Jackson smiled, acknowledging the change in his own professional standing. The Wellington Hartwick restoration had become a case study in preservation literature, and his firm now had a waiting list of historical properties seeking similar transformation. "Not bad for someone who initially told you this place might be beyond saving," he replied. "Fortunately, you didn't listen to expert opinion." "Desperation has its advantages," Rachel observed. "When you have nothing left to lose, impossible options suddenly seem worth trying." They walked together through the exhibition space, now familiar territory that they had helped create from the crumbling ruin of a year earlier. Their conversation turned to upcoming projects, a new wing dedicated to civilian experiences during military occupations, an expanded research library, enhanced visitor facilities in what had once been neighboring storefronts. The board approved the expansion budget this morning, Rachel informed him. "Construction can begin next month, assuming the preservation permits come through on schedule." From trying to save a failing bakery to planning a multi-million-dollar expansion, Jackson marveled. Wellington could never have known that his hidden documents would one day save a desperate widow from financial ruin, just as Rachel could never have predicted that her last-chance investment would uncover historical treasure. That evening, as the symposium participants departed and the center returned to its normal operations, Rachel took a final walk through the gardens. The autumn light cast long shadows across paths that had been carefully reconstructed according to 19th-century designs. Students from the local university were conducting an archaeological investigation of the former stable area, carefully sifting soil for artifacts that might reveal more about life during Wellington's occupation of Millfield. Jackson joined her, his clipboard tucked under his arm, his professional attention momentarily set aside as they enjoyed the peaceful conclusion of a successful event. "The lieutenant governor mentioned expansion funding for next year," he said. "Apparently, the center's economic impact on the region has caught the attention of state development officials." Rachel nodded. "They're seeing what we've always understood, that preserving history isn't just about the past. It's about creating foundations for the future." As twilight deepened, they moved toward the bakery's illuminated facade. The building that had once represented Rachel's financial rock bottom now stood as a beacon of historical significance and personal transformation. its warm lights welcoming visitors to discover both the story of Wellington's military genius and the journey of a woman who had found unexpected purpose among the ruins of her former life. "A year ago today," Jackson recalled, "you were wondering if you'd made another terrible mistake accepting the director position. You told me you weren't sure you could handle the responsibility." Rachel smiled at the memory of her earlier doubts. "I still have moments of disbelief that all of this grew from a desperate purchase with my last $450. Some investments can't be measured by conventional metrics," Jackson observed. "Sometimes the true value of a decision only becomes clear in retrospect." As they reached the entrance to the center, now close to the public for the evening, Rachel paused to look back at the path they had traveled. Not just the physical restoration of a historic building, but the rebuilding of a life from the ashes of financial disaster. "When Daniel died and I discovered the extent of our financial problems, I thought my life was over," she said quietly. Every path forward seemed to lead to greater loss. Buying this bakery was an act of desperation, not wisdom. Yet here we are, Jackson replied, gesturing to the beautifully restored building and the thriving historical center it housed. "Here we are," Rachel agreed. "Proof that endings sometimes conceal beginnings we couldn't have imagined." As they entered the center, the security lights illuminated the main exhibition hall where Wellington's battle plans were displayed alongside the crowbar that had pried up the floorboards to reveal them. The juxtaposition seemed to Rachel a perfect metaphor for her journey, the valuable and the ordinary, crisis and opportunity, desperation and discovery, all intertwined in ways that defied conventional understanding. The failing bakery she had purchased with her last dollars had yielded treasure far beyond financial value. The desperate decision made at the edge of bankruptcy had opened doors she never knew existed. The journey that had begun in tears of desperation had led to purpose and fulfillment she could never have foreseen. In the quiet of the center she now directed, surrounded by history preserved through her unlikely discovery, Rachel Turner understood that her greatest contribution might not be the documents she had found, but the story of resilience. Her journey represented proof that even in our darkest moments, unseen possibilities wait just beneath the surface, ready to be revealed by those courageous or desperate enough to break through the floorboards of conventional thinking and look deeper. As new visitors arrived each day to learn about Wellington's military genius and Hartwick's courage in preserving historical truth, they also encountered Rachel's story of transformation, a living testament to the power of perseverance in the face of apparent failure and the extraordinary potential hidden within ordinary circumstances, waiting for the right moment to emerge from darkness into light. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.